everybody, and welcome to another episode of Muppet Monday! Alright, to start off this episode, let's first talk about the documentary that appeared on PBS last week called In Their Words, Jim Henson. Or as I like to call it, Jim Henson, the Biography, the hour-long PBS special. If by chance you read the 2013 biography of Jim Henson, this documentary is kind of like a 1 hour long special that condenses all the information from that book. They even interviewed Brian J. Jones, the biographer, and my guess is he probably had a lot to do with putting this documentary together. We don't just learn about Jim Henson and his work and his inspirations, but we also learn about his humble beginnings and his family life and his career struggles, and they also interview a lot of people that he knew and his family members, and they give a lot of insight of his work and their opinions of it. It's a very, very real look at his life that I don't think's been addressed much, and for a lot of the unfamiliar, I think that the information will be really interesting and insightful. It doesn't just talk about Jim Henson and praising his work, it also addresses him like a normal person who had his ups and downs and struggles just like you and me. They even touch on his infidelities and the numerous failures that he had in his career. I know this is kind of a short review, but in a nutshell, I think that this was a pretty powerful documentary for being so short. And I myself couldn't help but get really, really emotional when they touched on his sudden death and how it just changed everything afterwards. Spoiler alert. If by chance you did not get the chance to watch it, it's available on pbs.org to watch, and also it's available on iTunes. Definitely check it out, especially if you're interested in learning about the history of the Muppets and also learning about their original creator and how he basically developed them. Now that we got that out of the way, let's now talk about the new series that's premiering this week. This week, guys. This week. So while it was to kind of be expected, there has recently been some backlash and controversy surrounding the idea that this new Muppet show is going to be adult. Although I personally don't think it's that big of a deal, the main group that seems to have a huge problem with it is the 1 Million Moms group, who think it's not going to be family friendly at all. Keep in mind, this is the group that had a problem with Macy's because they had a production number from Kinky Boots in the Thanksgiving Day Parade in 2013. And besides some parents having some concerns, there's also been some people commenting online about how they don't think that this is going to be a good representation of the Muppets. Some people have even stated that they think Jim Henson is rolling in his grave because Kermit said hell recently.
My life is a bacon-wrapped hell on earth.
Can't say hell.
I think the reason a lot of people are suspicious of this new series is because the Muppets for a lot of people are very nostalgic, especially if you're over the age of 30. In some ways that's a good thing, and in some ways that's a bad thing. It's really good for fans like myself because I know that the Muppets were always meant to be intended for adults, and I'm excited to see how they're going to explore their personal lives and the drama it's going to create, and I'm also excited to see how genuinely human these characters can be. But then there's a lot of people who are really nostalgic for the Muppets because they remember them being more innocent. For example, like when they were on The Muppet Show, and in the 80s when there was the Muppet Babies, and in the 90s when they were basically being marketed for kids, and a lot of people who grew up in those eras seem to remember them as just being silly fun. To those kind of people, I think that the Muppets have kind of been more like an escape from reality rather than being characters that can touch you on a really unexplainable level. I know it's very possible that a lot of those kinds of Muppet fans might be watching right now, and if you are, then I would like to take this moment to respectfully lay down a few things for you. By the way, guys, I apologize in advance if this is not a very ha-ha funny episode or anything, but I am very passionate about this and I think it needs to be talked about. So suck it up, here we go. Now before we start, I would like to make it clear that I am not here to tell you how you're supposed to think or how you're supposed to raise your kids. You're entitled to your own opinion at the end of the day. But being a big fan who has a lot of Jim Henson history knowledge, I would like you to please hear me out and keep a few things in mind before you decide to boycott the show. First of all, from what we've been hearing, the adult humor in the show is supposedly going to be very subtle. And I personally think it's going to be about wordplay more than anything, and that's what's going to make the show so funny. If you think about it, it's kind of Muppety because the Muppets have always been known for puns and the way they say things, so I think it's workable. Remember this gag from the first look presentation?
They're gonna be upset. Except the band. They're always happy. Legally now.
Yeah, that's not so bad, right? It's funny, and kids aren't really going to get that, but it's okay. The humor, I think, is going to revolve around the hardships of jobs and relationships, and I'm sure there will be some physical comedy in there too. I don't think that we're going to have the Muppets like blatantly talk about sex or grind up against each other. Ugh, that would be weird. So I think it's safe to say that everything is going to be pretty much kept on a PG level. Second thing to keep in mind, while I do think that relationships, sex, and possibly even drugs are going to be addressed, I don't think that there's gonna be actually any cussing in this show, besides Kermit saying the word hell. But I don't think that the producers would be actually encouraging parents to watch this show with their kids if it turned out that they were gonna be saying anything worse. The producers have said that they have kids and they really wanted to create a show that they could watch with their kids and enjoy it together. If you're really that concerned, then maybe watch the episode yourself, and if you think it's okay, then share it with your kids. In the end, I think that the humor will probably go over their heads a bit, but that doesn't mean that they can't enjoy the show. You know, to be perfectly honest, when I was a kid, I was watching The Simpsons with my dad, and I didn't get half the stuff that was going on, but I still really enjoyed the show. And besides, I think kids are a lot smarter and a lot more headstrong than we give them credit for, and I don't think that there's gonna be anything in this show that's gonna, like, corrupt them. Keep in mind, this is a show that's airing on ABC, not FX or HBO or any of those other big adult networks, alright? And the third and final thing that I think we need to keep in mind is that from what we've been hearing from a lot of people who are working on this show and from people who have worked with Jim Henson, they do think that this is something he would have wanted. And after being a big fan of his work for so many years, I have to agree. Something that I think we all need to try to keep in mind, and this was heavily addressed in the documentary, Jim Henson never intended for the Muppets to be a children's franchise. If anything, I think he tried really hard to make sure that they appealed to people of all ages and were very heavily entertaining for adults. And by the way, if you weren't already aware of all this, then I think you should go watch that documentary that I talked about. I think that we tend to think of the original Muppet Show and a lot of those early movies as like innocent and kid-friendly, because back then a lot of stuff on television had to be appropriate for the whole family. And I also personally think that we see it as innocent because back then they couldn't get away with as much stuff on television like we can now. But if you really look back on their history, the original pitch for the original Muppet Show was literally called Sex and Violence. It was kind of a joke more than anything, but Jim Henson called it that because he wanted to make sure that people knew that the Muppets were not just for kids. I think that it's really important to remember that Jim Henson was not just some humble guy who made fuzzy puppets for children's amusement. Jim Henson, in my opinion, was first and foremost a filmmaker. And when TV first came out, he was so fascinated by it and he wanted to work in it and he wanted to explore so many different ways that you can tell stories in that kind of medium. If you look back on a lot of his work, he did a lot of different experiments with TV and movies. He really was a pioneer of both puppetry and television, and you can really tell by looking back at a lot of his work. He was always trying to push everything to the next level to see what could be done with it. And if he were alive today, I think he really would have liked the mockumentary thing and said, hey, let's see what we can do with this. And also incorporating the more edgy side of the Muppets again, I think he would have been completely open to that too. If you think about it, actually, the Muppets were considered pretty edgy back in the 70s, so the fact that they're suddenly getting all this controversy for being edgy, that's probably a good thing. And with that said, I know that there's no way we can possibly go out there and inform every single Muppet fan of what Jim Henson's original vision was, but I do hope that on some level the public will still somehow understand and or adjust to what's to come. I really do hope that people will want to come back and keep watching it and will get invested in the relationships and in the comedic drama and also want to see how the characters are going to grow. Something interesting about the show is that it seems like there's going to be like a straight storyline, as in episode upon episode upon episode is going to be a continuation of each other, which they've never really done with a TV show with the Muppets. It's going to create a nice, long, fluid character arc, I think, and I hope that people will get invested in that too. And hopefully they'll also find the new edgy humor amusing. From what we've been getting at, it's going to be embracing the nostalgia of the Muppets, but then also combining it with something familiar like The Office, and I really hope, again, that people like that. And also, back to the controversy, I'm honestly trying not to be too worried about it, because if you look back on like the history of media controversy, people tend to like overreact to stuff, like edgy stuff in the media and exploitation, but after a while we just kind of move on from it. We as humans are adaptable, and we've dealt with a lot of shock value in the media over the years, so I don't think this controversy is gonna last too long, I don't think. They calm down, they get used to it, and then they find something else to complain about. Just keep in mind, Jim Henson is not rolling in his grave, and if you really want to honor his memory, then I think the next best thing is to support the people who are trying to keep his characters alive. Especially when it looks like, to me, that they are putting a lot of heart and passion into it. So hopefully that'll encourage you to at least give the show a chance and to be okay with the adult humor and situations that we're gonna see. And one more thing before we close this episode out, it's a little off topic, but something else that you should keep in mind when you start watching the show. You guys saw the 10-minute first look presentation that came out a couple of months ago, right? Yeah, well, forget that exists, okay? From what I've been seeing from the promos that have been coming out recently, it looks like that the very first episode of the show is going to have a lot of the same storyline, a lot of the same scenarios, and a lot of the same jokes as that pilot. And what that tells us is that that pilot really was meant to just be a test to prove that they could make the show work in this way. Not to mention they did a whole makeover of Denise, and Fozzie's girlfriend is now being played by a completely different actor, so I think it's safe to say that that pilot has nothing to do with the continuity of this upcoming series. I don't want you guys to be too confused if you watch the first episode and it feels like you basically watched the same thing over again, so just keep that in mind. And now that we basically forget about that pilot, it's actually a lot easier to accept the fact that Miss Piggy and Kermit broke up like a few months ago as opposed to like back in May when we first became aware of that pilot. By the way, could we just take a second to really give serious kudos to ABC for this genius campaign that they put together over the last couple months? I mean, I personally never imagined in a million years that Piggy and Kermit could like have a tabloid story, but ABC made it happen. It's really drawn people in to want to watch the series, and now The Muppets is like one of the most anticipated new shows of the season. And from here on out, I can only hope that the drama and character development is going to be just as juicy as these campaigns in order to make people keep coming back. And finally, one more thing that I have to ask, did anybody see the new promos that came out this week? And if you did anyone else have the same reaction as me when I first saw Kermit and Denise cuddling?
Come here, you.
What can I say? I'm attracted to pigs.
Aww. Wait, what? I mean, no. I'm not quite ready yet to accept this reality. I still personally think of Kermit and Miss Piggy as a couple, and I can only hope that they're gonna get back together at some point, because this whole build-up's gonna be for nothing if they don't. But we'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, be sure to watch the show this week. Blatant advertisement plug. It's premiering Tuesday the 22nd at 8/7 Central on ABC. And if possible, please do what you can to support the show by buying the episodes on Amazon or iTunes, because they will be available on both sites. And if you think that your friends are gonna enjoy it, then definitely encourage them to watch it. I know it's probably gonna be really good, but seriously, any support we can possibly give them to keep this series going, the better. Guys, it's not just premiering this week. It's premiering tomorrow. Yay! The wait's finally gonna be over soon! So those are my official thoughts concerning the controversy around the show. Now my question, as always, is, what do you guys think of the controversy? Go ahead and leave your comments below, and be sure to let me know if there's anything specific that you want me to address in the next Muppet Monday. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to subscribe to my channel and my vlog channel, and I'll see you guys again real soon for some more reacts, reviews, and Muppet Mondays. Bye, Adorkable Buddies, and enjoy the first